Today we have with us Samara Bay, author of Permission to Speak. Whether it's at the office meeting, presenting, pitching, or podcasting, we all have to face our own shit on what it feels like to be seen and heard when we put ourselves out there. That's where Samara comes handy. She coaches everyone from movie stars, rising leaders, to high school girls on how to become the new sound of power. Welcome, Samara.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Hello.
So
Hello from the
glad
past.
to have you.
Here in America.
Yes. So, Samara, my people have been wanting to know how they really get their voice out there. That's what they've just been looking at me for. And honestly, I've been trying to write this book for like 2 years and it has not been happening. So, you're my savior.
I feel like we should also be talking about how you're going to get your voice out there via this book.
Yeah,
I receive your generous savior title.
So, firstly, few questions. One, how on earth did you write this book? How do you get this book started? It's like I've been trying, there's drafts, and it's like I don't know what's going on. Just can't put my voice out there. So that's number one. Two, how did your journey kind of came about? Like how long did it really take? What did you start it off with to really get to this point? That's like, yeah, permission to speak is my thing.
Yeah. Okay. So origin stories galore, but here's one. In the summer of 2018, so 5 years ago now, just to honor that there is a journey that happens to write a book, right? I did not have the idea of a book. I did not. In fact, I think I had, perhaps this is common among those of you listening, a old story in my head that books are things that other people write, or books are things that experts write, or books are things that somebody who's more established, honestly, writes. And we can always point to like all the examples why that's true, but it was not actually helping me own my own ideas, right? I share that in case it's useful for anybody listening. So in the summer of 2018, I have this background as a dialect coach in Hollywood. I'm LA based. I have a background as an actor and then coaching actors on accents. So Americans to sound foreign, foreigners to sound American, Americans to work on like really specific regional accents. And I was working with movie stars. And one of the people that I worked with the summer of 2018 was Gal Gadot. I got to coach her on Wonder Woman.
Oh my God, you coaching Wonder Woman?
So I told Wonder Woman how to talk. No, listen, Gal's amazing. And most big budget projects, especially when their lead is English as a second language, will have a dialect coach on set. And it was an honor. I've worked with her more than once. I adore her, but that was a very weird summer for us in the US. We were 2 years into that former president's presidency. And that was the summer we were learning what was happening at the border between Mexico and the US. We were seeing pictures of these kids being separated from their families. I mean, trigger warning. It was so emotionally destroying. And I'm enough connected to activist friends that I knew everybody was burning out. And here I was in Washington, D.C., working on Wonder Woman about this made up iconic hero coming in and saving the day while going to protests in my off days, being like, we need a hero and it doesn't exist. And in the midst of that, I got this call. A friend of mine had put me up for working with first-time women candidates for office for the 2018 midterms, which were going to be like 6 months from then. And this organization called moveon.org that just helps first-time candidates with resources, including training, reached out and asked if I would be interested pro bono, right? Totally free in helping these candidates. And I'd never done anything like it. And I was like, hell yes, tell me where to sign up. This is insane. So I started working with these. It was all women. That year, there was this huge influx of first-time female candidates. And I would do these Zoom sessions And I would hone in on how each of these absolutely magnificent people who are exactly who we want to have literally leading us, representing us, how they were getting in their way. And by that, I mean all kinds of things having to do with what happens to all of us when public speaking is on the table, right? Some of it is just literally our relationship to our voice. Do I sound weird? Accent or no accent? But it's always these deeper questions that I knew were there, because even working with movie stars, they have insecurities around their voice. The deeper questions that all of us actually have about like our relationship to our ideas out loud. How do I speak my own ideas like I sound like I know what I'm talking about, and like I sound like what powerful people might sound like in the future if we get to completely rewrite the rules on what power even sounds like. I say that way because I realized in working with those candidates that all of us are walking around with so many shoulds. So many, if I want to get taken seriously, I have to sound like this. I have to talk like this. I have to not swear. I have to keep my voice low. I have to not say any ums or uhs. I have to not say like. I have to not, a lot of people are worried about going up at the end of their sentences. I have to not go down too much at the end of my sentences and end up in vocal fry, which is this thing that's considered, very Californian, but a lot of people have. We've all accumulated a billion little tiny, seemingly helpful hints from experts, from the media, from maybe our own parents, well-meaning mentors, first bosses, basically amounting to, if you want to sound powerful, sound like someone else.
Oh.
And inevitably, this ends up affecting who the most? Well, women, people of color, English as a second language folks, anyone who is aware that they sound quote unquote different. And so, of course, actually, my public speaking career has ended up being a career in social justice. They're deeply interconnected. That's what it is to actually speak in a public that literally wasn't built for you. So this is my long story, but the answer to your question is, then at just the right moment, I met a literary agent and I was not pitching a book. And my friend beautifully introduced me and said, oh, you two should meet. And he asked me what I'm about. And I had just pitched a podcast actually to iHeartRadio, which you can still find. It's from 2020, called Permission to Speak. And I was like, hi. And he's like, I think there might be a book in you. And I, thank God, did not say what was in my head, which was what? Instead, I was like, say more. And we ended up having a Zoom relationship, him and me and the junior literary agent that he brought in. And the three of us brainstormed how I could write a proposal that I would sell. And that is the real answer to your question, because once I sold the proposal in a 13-way bidding war the second week of the pandemic over Zoom, well, then I had money and a clock ticking. And that's how I actually wrote the book.
That's awesome. That is amazing. How it just like lines up for you, right?
I mean, obviously, I'm leaving out the parts where it didn't make sense. I'm leaving out, I'm saying this on purpose. I left out of that story the year that it took me to write that proposal, while I was, to be fair to me, also full-time dialect coaching on set, 12-hour days, some of my weeks, but also dealing with imposter syndrome, or whatever we want to call it, procrastinating, talking myself out of, fulfilling my life's purpose, perhaps we could say.
Yeah, there's quite a few of us that wants to write a book. What does it really take to write that proposal?
It's such a good question. Thank you for asking. So I didn't know, and obviously all I have is my own experience, although at this point I have talked to a number of author friends. Like, we found each other, for even like 5 or 6 of us whose books debuted this year. We found each other on the internet, or we were introduced, and we were all like, is your launch weird? My launch is weird. Book launches are weird. Wait, no one actually reads books. Of course, your audience does, right? We're a bunch of intellectuals here, but really the numbers are so comically low compared to TV and film and
for sure,
right? Anyway, wait, what was your question?
My question was, how do you write the proposal? Yeah. What does it take?
So those, I referenced that there were some early Zoom meetings. What my literary agents did, which was a real gift, and I'm giving it to you, to all of you, because what a just lucky break that the sort of gatekeeper opened the gate. They gave me a bunch of quite simple, deliberately simple steps, like incremental steps. So the first one, and I seriously encourage anyone to do this assignment, they said make a list of 50, but I actually crossed it off and wrote 25 because I was like, let's be realistic. A list of 50 or 25, 4 lists. One, ideas that I am pretty sure I made up, that when I coach them to political people, to now business people, etc., I know I made that up. I made that up. That's my idea. List them. Second list, 25 ideas I know I did not make up, and I would love to credit the person that did make them up, but boy, are they useful. Third list, 25 people I would like to identify who are either who are either in my field or in a, I don't know, related field. I mean, my field is a big old mishmash of psychology and sociology and linguistics and performance theory and like how we be in the world. And, so, but name people that I want to either literally go out and interview, like put on my fake journalist hat and ask for an interview, or just dive into the work of and like lift it. And the final 25 was 25 pieces of data, either actual hard science or studies, like leadership studies, that could support any of my stuff. It took forever with that list, but I finally did it in like probably 2 days, right? The forever was mostly the procrastinating. But when I put those lists together, the next step for me that they gave me was to start to notice themes. Are there buckets of ideas that keep popping up? And I had an aha in the shower. I say this on purpose because like we have to normalize this, right? The hard brain part of me was like, oh, I don't see the themes emerging. And then the soft brain version of me that just like took a shower one day was like, oh, my first chapter is going to be called breath. My second chapter is going to be what happens after breath. Okay, my second chapter is going to be called size, actually, because how much size we decide to take up with the words that we say actually determines whether or not we get to the end of the thought and offer it up, or get to the end of the thought and take it back.
Wait, what?
And then the next one would, I know. Well, this is like how sentences actually work. But, we actually all say like, here's my idea. And then how do we say it is the question. Do we go, here's my like idea, but I don't know, whatever.
Oh, which makes it's like, it's such a small thing. Like it's not worth saying, or you're saying
Exactly.
the way you're saying it, you go, oh my God, this is my idea. And that's like a big way to say it.
Right. Or something in between. That's literally because, right, you don't need to, I'm not saying that you need to push, right? I'm not saying that we need to say, believe me, chest pump, but there is a huge amount that we all learn from each other by how we talk. And that is central to my work. And some of it is the biases and the stereotypes that we have about people based on how they talk. But some of it is literally just each of our own choices in the moment of how to say a thing that we want to say based on, quite honestly, how much we believe we deserve to take up time and space.
Yeah, that's gonna.
So that was chapter 2, and then there's a chapter on emotion, and there's a chapter on pitch, because almost all of us have opinions about whether we talk too high or too low, and if we go monotone and all of that. And there's a chapter on tone. But all this literally happened in the shower with these one-word title ideas that were the solution to this bucket idea that they had offered, right? So what are the buckets that all these lists would fall into? And then from there, they gave me a few other assignments that were like, great, now like write a paragraph about what each of those chapters is going to be about. Now write a 3-page essay about what each of those chapters is going to be about. And that became the proposal. Plus what I call my manifesto. They called my cover letter. This actually, I will offer this up as well, because I think this is an essential part. And if I hadn't done that other work on the chapters, this alone, I think, would have gotten me some version of a book deal. I knew that they wanted me to put together the why me Like, what am I really talking about here? Why does this book need to exist? And why me? Why am I the person to tell it? And of course, we have to allow for all of the mean voices that are going to come up when we ask ourselves that question, and then brush them aside lovingly, right? Thank you. You're trying to protect me. I'm on to bigger things. Thank you. Thank you. And then what? So why are you the differentiator? You know, what's your differentiator? Why are you the person who needs to talk about this stuff? And often, quite honestly, I lovingly say, I don't want to suggest that like competition is the way to go here, but I do want to lovingly offer that for most of us, we have a little inkling of what the other people in our industry or the other people who we know are, you know, up to what we're up to, what they're getting a little wrong, and who it's leaving behind. And that little sense of, maybe it's a big sense, but that, you know, growing ember of, quite honestly, of injustice, of what they're getting wrong is leaving people behind. And that means we're not stepping into the future in the way we want to. Connecting to that fire, that is the number one best piece of advice I have. And I finally let myself do that in this one afternoon when I had like a 4-hour break. And I remember just like, okay, I told myself, I pep talked myself, I'm going to say the thing. And I discovered in the doing of that I had a lot to say about what people were quote unquote doing wrong. And in my case, I mean, you know, the old stories that public speaking coaches tend to continue to tell us, you know, if you want to get taken seriously, you have to sound like this. And how many of us that leaves behind.
Wow. Can you give us like a couple of examples of what that might mean?
Yeah, you know, if you Google right now how to sound more authoritative, Google will tell
we're saying
you,
like if we hear something like you got to lower your tone or something, and,
right.
and we do that, which is probably something I've taken up over the years. Because I remember when I was as a kid, my voice, I think my mom actually told me, can you be quiet because your voice is too high? Like it's like, you know, screeching to the ears or something. So I think I took that so harshly that I've actually lowered my voice significantly over time. So something like that. Is that what you mean?
For sure. And if anyone is listening, like, this is so incredibly common. And not only that, but I have another origin story that I actually start my book introduction with, which is that same. And not only did I start lowering my voice, pitch wise, just a little bit, right? I wasn't Elizabeth Holmes. It wasn't so wild that people could tell, but I must have started doing it in maybe high school or college. And my guess, it wasn't a specific person's comment that I was responding to, but my guess is that I must have kind of calculated on some subliminal level that I was coming across as really friendly and warm and girly, you know, whatever the adjectives are that one could guess. And that a fantastic way to counter that effect would be to lower my pitch a little bit so that I seemed a little more in on the joke, you know, one of the guys. And it worked until in my 20s, when I was in the middle of an acting graduate program and thus talking a lot and singing a lot and, you know, whatever, I guess more than I had been, it started to catch up to me. And over a 3 or 4 month period, I was losing my voice. It was deeply painful at the end of every day and lightly back in the mornings and then gone again. And I ultimately just stopped talking for like a month. And I would sit like late at night in Providence, Rhode Island in the dead of winter, you know, feet of snow, literally like drinking tea, not talking to my friends or my parents or, you know, checking in with anyone because it hurt too much, being like, literally, what is my voice trying to tell me? What is happening? And I didn't know I'd been lowering my pitch. That's what I've now discovered. But at the time, all I knew was I was in pain. And that I also, that when you don't talk and people don't expect you to talk, they start ignoring you. So I had been going to class like a ghost and obviously like having an existential experience being like, who even am I? And so I finally got myself to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And I have now heard that a lot of people have been through something like this. And they stuck a little camera up my nose and down the back of my throat. And I got a photo of my vocal cords. And you could tell they diagnosed me from those cords. There was a blister on each side of my vocal cords.
Oh my God. You can do
parallel
that?
to each other. Mm-hmm. And most of us who talk at a pitch that isn't what our body's optimum pitch is, ultimately get some version of that. It's not necessarily the full-on callus where you need to go to surgery, as some of the singers that we know have had to do, but it is the beginnings of that. It's like the little red bumps you get when you rake a lawn for an afternoon.
Oh
And
God, I didn't even know that's a possible thing.
So, like, just to kind of name it, like, that was internalized misogyny. I mean, I didn't know at the time, but now I do. Like, the story is, as you told us, as your mom told you, keep your pitch low if you want to not be annoying. Keep your pitch low if you want to get taken to anybody here who's in a corporate context. I don't know if it's exactly the case in Australia, and I would love to hear back from listeners, but I know all through the US, and I just did a book tour in London. This comes up everywhere. There's executive presence training, and everyone says, without batting an eye, keep your pitch low. Literally, don't talk at the vibrational level that a lot of women and some men actually talk at, because it's how their anatomy works. So on the one hand, we can, and perhaps in certain cases should, take that advice. It's a quick way to get taken seriously. And I am not here as a coach to deny that. And on the other hand, what I came to through really claiming my own, thought leadership in this space is reinforcing an old model of what kind of leader we want to see in the world. And we are not living in the kind of world where that kind of leadership is working so well. So perhaps we can name that keeping your voice low is one of the elements of, I lovingly offer, the old sound of power. And that there is a new sound of power that is emerging. And actually, we all have examples of it. We can think about people in our own life, or our favorite podcaster, or our favorite local politician, or our favorite, national politician, or artist, right? It's when the Oscars happen and there's all of the award show speeches. Which ones go viral? Which ones have you personally felt a physical urge in your actual human body to share because it so rang true? They do not follow any of those rules.
Yeah, I don't think Tay-Tay has a low voice, really. I don't follow
mean,
but
literally,
I don't think she does. And nor does Barbie, right?
Exactly. And let's name that they have power, not necessarily in the way that corporations would define that term, but they have power, and honestly, a massive amount of influence and sway. And how are they spending it, right? How are they using it? Well, that's a good leadership study. I want to see that one.
I still have this seed of curiosity from before, when you talked about training people on the accent. Can we get a sample of that? I want to hear different accent. Can you do different accents?
I know. But I will say this, there is a difference between being a mimic who can just switch into all of them and kind of perform, and a good coach. And I can do some mimicry, obviously. I'm just sort of choosing not to. But the coaching part of it is actually its own real skill. It's not just that you're jobbed in as a coach to be do it like me. No, you're actually empowering this artist, this gentle soul in front of you, to talk in a way that isn't normal. All of their body and ego, all the alarms go off, right? It happens for any of us if we're trying to talk differently than we're used to. And then how do they let those alarms relax? How do they let their body actually, sort of live into this new version of talking? The reality is, each of us, our voice reflects our actual lived experience, right? This is what's so cool about linguistics, that linguists really just say your voice represents the life you've actually lived, the places you've moved to, the ways in which you've wanted to sound like your parents or that you haven't, the languages you've learned, the people you've dated, the friends you've had, right? When people say, I want to stop saying so much, I'm I hear you, I understand. And you probably reflect who you love you sound like who you love. So the term in linguistics that I think is cool is idiolect, IDIO, idiolect. It literally means each of us is a unicorn. We don't sound like a single other person on earth. And so when I'm doing this dialect work with an actor, it is about putting someone else's lived experience into their mouth. And it's cool and weird. And I loved it. I love it. I still do a tiny bit, but you know, now that I've started working in these other industries, it's very exciting to me.
Samara, most of what we've been talking about is like the way our voice is actually coming out when we're speaking, right? Without people thinking that's kind of what you're just about. How most people is actually struggling, not about the actual voice, whether it's high or low, that kind of stuff, but it's like, how do I even put myself out there? Like just to actually get themselves out there. And I do remember it's like really scary before when sitting around like an office table and you have this thought that you go, I don't know if this is worthy of saying it out loud to the table. From that to later on being like, well, do I even want to show up on a video? Like, what can I say that millions of other thought leaders haven't said already? How do we combat that?
I mean, this is the work of a lifetime, right? I mean, what you just named is what self-work is all about, right? Any self-help book, any personal development workshop, totally. At the base, many of us are dealing with some not enoughness. And we are living in a very loud world. And despite those two things, and what I said about the voice is metaphorically true as well as literally true, our voice is different because of our lived experience. And back when I had my podcast, I had this incredible woman on who is a consultant for politicians and an advocate for reproductive rights in Washington, D.C. And I said, what do you tell people who are running for office? So literally, you know, running for office, who don't look or sound like traditional, quote unquote, traditional leaders have looked and sounded like. What do you tell them? And she said, my best advice is take the time to own all the parts of your life, the parts that were on purpose, the parts that were accidental that happened to you. You don't have to talk about all the parts in public, but take the time to own that that's the life you've actually lived. That's the perspective you actually have. And then when you get up to speak, you don't have to waste as much time and as much energy hiding, trying to hide the ways that you don't think you are credible. And this is not easy to do, but it is an invitation. And this is the dare, right? The dare for each of us. You were meeting me at a moment when I am further along than I was when I was writing this book, not writing the book, but writing the proposal. And then this thing happened, which is that when the proposal was ready, the pandemic hit. I had a moment of sort of grieving, like, oops, I guess this isn't going to move forward. And instead, 14 different publishers from all of the major publishing houses in the United States wanted to meet with me. And that week where I did 14 pitches in a row, a lot of things happened. One of the things that happened is I sold my book. But another thing that happened is that I allowed myself to notice that so many of those people were calling me a thought leader, which was not a term I had used prior. And that obviously we all have space that we can roll our eyes and be like, who isn't a thought leader these days? You know, totally get it. I was also told a number of times, and I have been told since then a number of times, that I remind people of Brene Brown. And I similarly had an eye roll. Yeah, okay, I get it. You're looking for the next Brene Brown. Okay, fine. I see your like factory. And in both of those cases, I'm telling you this because it is so easy for us to let these tiny little signs that we're on the right track go by unnoticed. But I made myself stay there and go, I'm hearing this enough from enough, fancy New York decision makers. why don't I actually take the invitation? The invitation is, if I'm a thought leader, I should probably trust my own thoughts. What if I did? And this on some level is what my book is actually about. What is it to trust our own thoughts, whether we're talking about literal voice or metaphorical voice, living our values out loud, writing on a page? What is the process by which we go, oh, perhaps the world needs me? And how do we bring a little mischief into that, quite honestly? Because often this feels so heavy that we forget what we're here to do.
What do you feel like you're here to do?
I honestly feel like what happened that summer of 2018, the confluence of my life and with the dialect coaching and the Hollywood lens, and my life with the politicians and my sort of untested, weird, new thoughts about how we use our voices in space and how we, kind of determine our own sense of power, all came clearer to me when I saw this meme on the internet. It was a Venn diagram, 2 circles, just 2. And one said, what breaks your heart the most about the world? And the other said, where your skill set lies. And the overlap is what we should be doing with our life. And, we've all seen some version of this, right? Ikigai. It's like, it's almost a cliche, but there was something so specific about that language, what breaks your heart the most about the world. And I remember thinking, like, first of all, how could anyone figure out what the most is? Like, what a wild exercise. But I had the second thought of, that's actually kind of incredible that if you can, it could lead you somewhere. It doesn't just make you feel heavier to figure out what's breaking your heart. It actually is a sign of something. And I realized, still gets me every time I talk about this, I realized when I was working with those women who are running for office, and I had just seen that Venn diagram, and I had just been thinking, like, how could anyone figure out what breaks their heart the most? That actually I kind of figured it out. What breaks my heart the most about the world is that too often the wrong people are in charge. And I have a little bit of a way that I can help with that. And so that's what I'm doing.
That's incredible.
Thanks for asking.
It's so true though, that when you talk about what's breaking your heart, because that is actually different for everyone. That's why there will be people that's going out to like save the whales or something. But it's like, yeah, we like general people can go, yeah, I care about animals and things, but no, some people really just care about them a lot more.
Right. And how awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess not only does our voice have an idiolect, our heart does too. And there is some process of like figuring it out. And we don't have to have it. Like mine ended up feeling kind of pat enough that I wrote it in my last chapter of my book, and it feels kind of like a complete story. But that does not mean yours has to, right? Start somewhere. What tends to break my heart? What tends to like get me every time, right? Finish that sentence for yourself, all of you. Because there really may be something there where like, damn, I actually have a skill that is specifically able to be focused, laser focused toward that specific, very weird heartbreak.
Yeah. And it shows, because there's no way you would, put in your free time, because I remember you were saying that's pro bono work and you loved it. It's like nobody puts their own time on things that doesn't matter to them, right? It's like we just got to really follow that.
It's totally true. And then obviously also, ask for what we're worth. The money side of it also has to count, but completely, like for each of us, there's breadcrumbs in the life we are already living, the choices we're already making about, the little things that maybe are your fire spark. I mean, that manifesto that I wrote in that 4-hour window that became the proposal for the book, I think that was the clincher. You guys, I had 1,000 followers on Instagram. I was like so unestablished, but I was able to put my fire onto the page. And I think people were like, we need this.
That's the burning desire that everyone's looking for. You found yours.
Well, but also, yes, and I hope that it is clear from the way I'm talking about this, that it is accessible to all of us. There is just some work to do. I mean, there really were the days where I was like, what am I doing? Why do I think I can do this? Why, you know, that the imposter syndrome that comes up in that one stupid phrase, who am I to? ... There's this lovely woman named Serena Hicks who loves to push back on that and say, who are you not to? And I'm like, ooh, oh, okay. And also, listen, you probably know this too. The original question was, how do we get our voice out there more? The more we do it, the more we actually do figure out what our style is. You know, the way that you all are hearing me communicate now, that's sort of free flowing. And, you know, I hit my points when I hit my points, but otherwise I'm like, oh, I don't know. This is actually on purpose. I am modeling. I've just done 6 months of on and off book launch, book promotion. I've talked to Deepak Chopra. I've talked to so many interesting people, and I have intentionally decided to not try to sound like somebody who, quote unquote, would get taken seriously, but rather say, this is me showing up as whole and coherent and emotionally available as possible, and calling this power.
I love this. Thank you so much. I think most people will be able to relate to this. We look forward to the resources. I'll be sure to put the links in. I believe you have a gift for our listeners as well, which is, I think is it a 5-minute warm-up?
It is. What do I do before going on camera or on the mic? I'm so glad you asked. No, it's so cool. I made a little 5-minute video. Seriously, this is partly because I think warm-ups, the idea of a warm-up sounds like maybe something a theater person does. And this is really for anybody. And it is not just a body and breath kind of thing. It's also like, where do you put your mind? You know, I've read Presence by Amy Cuddy. There's so many psychologists who have answers to what to do to prime yourself to go on the mic or go on stage in your, you know, most powerful version of yourself. You might as well use it. It's at samarbay.com/goodies, GOODIES.
Does that help people with the anxiety as well?
I think so. But the other thing is obviously my book. I mean, I have a whole section on nerves because that is the #1 question I get. I mean, of course, you can't talk about public speaking without being like, oh, wait, by the way, everyone hates public speaking.
We look forward to reading your book. Thank you so much for being on the show. And what's the best place to find Samara?
Go to samarbay.com if you want to know the latest on how to work with me on some amazing workshops I have coming up, although they're in person, so you have to be in the United States this time around, at least for them in the fall. Samarbay.com. But the other thing is, find me on Instagram. DM me. I do a reel a week. I think it's how we got in touch.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that's it. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.